Welcome to another Confessio conversation with your host, the one and only me. It's Lee, and today we have on the show April Weir. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. Happy to be here.
I'm very happy to see your background. I think that looks absolutely incredible.
Thank you. Thank you. It gets a lot of attention. It's just a silk screen, but I think it's pretty cool.
It's perfect. I actually thought it was a full-on brick wall. So, April, for the folks that don't know who you are, could you just give us a little bit of a quick 60-second bio of the world of April?
Sure. April Wier. I'm the happy mother to John and dog mom to Francis. And I run a small digital agency just north of Atlanta. We're WordPress exclusive so far. You never knew what might happen, but so far. And we specialize in legal firms, medical firms, and content creators. And so really focused on medical right now, and which kind of leads us here today.
Absolutely. So, yes, today, spoiler alert, we're definitely going to be looking at HIPAA compliance. And before you turn off, folks, this is going to be fascinating because you're going to be sharing some actual real life experiences of yourself, your own journey, etc., which I'm fascinated to hear about, especially when working in areas of medical. So, do you mind just, first of all, giving us a quick what is HIPAA for the absolute beginner, which is definitely me, as you're aware, in our conversation just before we hit record?
Right. So HIPAA actually stands for the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. And it was brought about to help people be able to take their medical information and move it and make sure that it's kept private. And then it just kind of morphed and grew into kind of a privacy act for everything having to do with patient health information. So we
Mm.
call that PHI. And so it could also stand for protected health information, but it really what it is information that is specific to an individual and their health and being identified as a person linked to that information.
Okay, so would that be if I was to visit a doctor in the US, that doctor may put some information into a database about me, and that has to comply with a set of regulations and be shared in certain ways?
Yes, and this is US specific. Other countries have their own version of this, but am speaking specifically to the US regulations. And so, yes, so it would be information in a database. When you walk into the doctor and you're filling out a paper form, that information also has to be protected. When you enter your name and email address into the contact form, that is also needs to be protected. So it's kind of there's a lot to be protected and it can get quite complicated, but hopefully we're gonna try to make it a little bit more simple today.
Awesome. So how did you get into this? Because this seems very left of field for just a web development and web design. What's the journey there?
Well, it wasn't something that I intentionally went lean towards. In
Mhm.
fact, if you've been in any WordPress or digital marketing forums, you will see over and over again when someone mentions HIPAA, the old timers will be like, don't touch that with a 10-foot
Mm.
pole. I would
Yeah.
never, ever, ever. Right. But I'm kind of like the kind of person, if you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of like hard headed like that. So I was a little bit interested and very challenged by it. And my next door neighbor at the time, and this was a long time ago, she worked for a hair restoration surgeon in Atlanta. And she's
Mhm.
like, we need somebody to come in and do blogs. And so even writing content for medical is very specific because there's things you can say, there's things you
Mm.
can't say. And so that kind of I started my educational journey there, and then little by little, I ended up taking over all their marketing, and I had to learn HIPAA compliance on my own.
Mm.
And there's almost nothing. I mean, there's a lot of information about HIPAA, but it's all extremely complex and overcomplicated, and it's not really for us, right? It's more for the healthcare providers. And so what I did was I started kind of documenting as I was learning and then kind of came together and put it all together in a course and it's called
Mhm.
Medical Marketing Unlocked. And what it is we're trying to just simplify this and make it kind of a one-stop shop for getting started to learn this because it's really hard to learn this on your own.
Mm. So, as a web developer, you may be looking at a potential opportunity with someone in the medical industry, and this is a big potential blocker. What are some of the ramifications, I guess, if you were to get this wrong?
Well, you could lose your business, you could lose your house, your
Oof.
client could lose their business, lose their house. I mean, that sounds very dramatic, but I mean, honestly, the
Mm,
fines are can get astronomical. They really don't want to fine you. What they want is to see that you have processes in place. What I have found as I've been talking to people about this course is there's a lot of people doing work with medical and they're not doing it correctly at all.
mm,
And they don't know, quite frankly, some of them don't care, but that opens up a big opportunity for people like us who can learn about compliance and who can come in and be educated and educate the client. It's an incredible distinction when you go and sit in front of a doctor and they're saying, "Well, what makes you different from everybody else?" And you can say, "Well, because I'm educated on how to keep you safe."
yeah. No, that's powerful. And have you any examples of what could happen should somebody not do their due diligence when supporting a client in this way?
Yeah, so one of the most popular examples is a woman went to rehab
Mm,
and then somebody he was like a janitor or like a housekeeper type role, saw this person in their everyday work. And then when they were out somewhere, that
mhm.
approached the person and started talking to them because they recognized them from the rehab facility.
Right.
And it was in front of other people, and that was a breach of privacy. That facility was fined a gigantic amount. Of course, that man lost his job,
Mhm.
and the person that had gone to rehab was embarrassed in front of their
Mm,
friends. It's about keeping the patient information safe, but it's
mhm.
also about keeping us safe as we're working because we don't want to be the kind of people that make those breaches. Most
Sure.
common for us would be taking in lead because we're trying to get leads for our clients. The most common breaches there are we're not handling the lead information correctly, right?
Mm,
Like it's downloaded up, it's in a spreadsheet on our computer, or we're just sending it through unsecure email. All of those things are it's easy to get around it in a compliant way. But if
mhm.
you don't have that knowledge, then you could just be like sprinkling breaches left and right and not even know.
So, for example, we could be putting a site together and we're trusting, for example, a WordPress plugin to allow us to capture information from a client. And if we're not doing our due diligence and making sure that that plugin is either encrypting the data in some way or protecting that information in some way, we could actually accidentally cause a breach of client information, especially if a bad actor is trying to spider through the website and find information.
Exactly, and also, even though healthcare agencies, health clinics, they're trained on this stuff,
Mhm.
supposedly, but what about the person they just hired last week who's been thrown
Mm,
in the role of marketing coordinator and they really don't know what they're doing? You also have to train them how to not cause breaches when they talk to you. Like,
mm,
I have seen, and heard of people, like, having a problem let's say they have a problem with their form, right? And they're looking at the form details and it's got the person's name and everything, and
mhm.
it's not for there's something wrong with the formatting. So they screenshot it and email it to you. That's a breach,
Wow. Yes. Just simple
okay?
things like that. Yeah.
Simple things like that, or even them gossiping with you about a patient that just came in, that
Mhm.
is also a breach,
Yeah.
right? Not only do we need to know how to keep ourselves safe, but we
Mhm.
need to be able to keep them safe as well.
So yes, I mean, I'm logically thinking here, or say programmatically, I'm a developer. That's obviously how I'm going to think of how can I protect data. But this goes way beyond that. This is how do you act as a professional in this industry providing a service? If somebody's going to start gossiping to me, I'm going to have to shut that conversation down because I'm now aware of HIPAA and
Right.
aware that this could potentially be a breach of someone's privacy. I'm going to have to say, hey, I'm really sorry. We're going to need to gonna close that conversation down and move on. This is why, or for the sake of our own protection, hang up the call if it gets too far. So yeah, it goes way.
I'm sorry, you're
Yeah,
breaking
I'm
up.
really sorry, I can't hear you. Exactly that. So yeah, so wow, this goes. So I guess then, because obviously many agencies don't just do web design; they do things like social media marketing and PR and all those
Right.
sorts of things. So I guess there must be wider ramifications there too.
There's certain things, and this may not necessarily be HIPAA, but it's like legal. You
Mhm.
can't say anything's a cure. And even if you do, let's just say you do that on your Facebook ads, Facebook's
Mhm,
going to shut you down
mhm,
because that's against the law. You can't say that. There's lots of nuances, but and it kind of sounds almost like it's not worth the effort, and that's why a lot of people say, "Oh, I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole because the
mhm.
risk is so high for you and the client." But there's actually kind of a bigger picture, and I'd like to share that with you. Here in the
Please.
United States, we have some real problems with our healthcare system. I don't That's no secret. Everybody in the
Mhm,
world knows that. And one of the big issues is we've got big hospital chains that come in and gobble up mom and pop businesses and just kind of absorb them into the hospital chain. And
mhm.
then what happens is the decisions are not just made, like for your healthcare, are not just made by a doctor. They're made by a board of directors, the bureaucracy, the management. And I've experienced this with my own health and my healthcare of my son. It's not an ideal situation for anybody. The doctor loses their autonomy and their
Mhm.
authority. You don't necessarily get the best healthcare because it goes outside that bubble of you and your provider. And
Yeah.
so what happens is it's harder and harder and harder for these smaller mom and pop, clinics to compete against these chains. And so if we as marketers, can help that, then we can actually help our healthcare. So, we're uniquely positioned as marketers to make a change in a way that nobody else is. If you can come in and raise their revenue by 20% year over year, that might be the difference between them staying in business or selling out to a hospital chain, right? And so, I get really passionate about this because it's more than just marketing. And I think a lot of us are looking for that little something more in our business, that we want to do good in the world. And, yes, it is good helping, small businesses or even large businesses, with our marketing. There's
Mm,
nothing wrong with that. And that is doing good. But there is a certain level of satisfaction that it's almost like David versus Goliath, like really you're taking on this big, and I don't want to call it a threat because, hospital chains do a lot of good in
mhm,
standardizing care. But what we really do need to protect diversity in our
mhm.
healthcare. And that's what we can do as marketers. If we can go in and help them thrive and survive and enjoy their business and make it where they don't want to hand that off to somebody else, then we're helping ourselves because we can charge more because we have a distinction. We're helping the doctor because we're helping him or her keep their independence, and we're helping the community because we help preserve diversity.
And that's really powerful, isn't it? Because what you're describing there is a mission that is way beyond, hey, we're going to help people in the medical industry make more money.
Right.
What
Yeah.
we're actually saying here is we're going to help people get access to personalized care with local medical professionals, with people who can really help them, with experts, etc., who are not having to be gobbled up, as it were, by these bigger companies. And we get that kind of more faceless, more you're just a number sort of experience. And
Right.
we so often forget in business that yes, we enjoy web development, we enjoy the design, we enjoy the marketing, etc. These are things we enjoy doing, and we can do them with any business. But there's sometimes that little missing bit where we don't feel fulfilled, if that makes sense. And what you've
Right.
described there is something that I think that you as a business owner, but also your team as well, could really rally around and say, "Hey, this is something that will make us feel fulfilled." Let me give you a kind of a counter example. We look after the events industry, and one of the things that we learned was the websites that we make for our event clients obviously attract people to these events. People register and they go and attend them. And from what we understand, especially during, for example, COVID, certain people met in a room at an event. One of our websites was involved in this chain, very small, small, small part. But it meant that those two people met, and that became a very important conversation in understanding a cure or a vaccine, etc., for COVID.
Good.
So for us, we were
Mhm.
like, holy moly, we play a really, really, really tiny part. We're not even connected to them in any
Right.
way, but we're supporting at least the event organizers, and we're helping them. So our mission nowadays is not just to grow a profitable business in the events industry, but our mission nowadays is to play a really, really small but essential part of a much bigger industry that gets people together in a room where really important world changing things happen. So, and what you've described is kind of a world changing, or at least for the US healthcare system, changing mission that I think any business could really get behind.
I think so too. And I think it's really well suited for people who are a bit rebellious,
Yeah,
right? And I know a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in the marketing world, we're all a little bit rebellious, or else we'd be working in a big shop somewhere. We want to do things
exactly.
our way. And I think it's really a natural fit for us to get into this role
Mm,
of being kind of opposing a system,
mm,
which is kind of where we are in our personal lives a little bit. And especially something that people have told us over and over again, you can't or shouldn't do. That's a natural fit for me. Like
mhm,
that's you want me to do something, tell me I can't do it. Right.
yeah,
And so what I really wanted to do, because I feel so passionately about this whole situation, and I had to learn how to do this on my own, is I really wanted to take all these complex things and just make them really simple, because
mm,
there are some principles, if you follow them, that you're going to cover the vast majority of your exposure. And
yeah,
once the exposures are covered, you can go in and do good work and charge a premium for it, right?
mhm,
So I like to say, I tell a story about how we are almost always the third agency or third provider that someone comes to, especially
mm,
for web design. So when they first get started, they first launch their practice, they either get like their nephew or the local, web nerd to build them a website. They don't know what they're doing. It's not, they don't know who they're talking to. It's just, they just put it up. It's the cheapest price, because why wouldn't you choose the cheapest price if you don't know what else you should be looking for, right?
yeah,
And of course, that lasts not very long before they're like, oh, yeah, this is not representing us well. And so they have a big reaction and they go with a big corporation. And where the nephew or the community person probably didn't understand compliance. And now the doctor's like, I feel a little icky about this. I'm really nervous. So they just overcompensate. They go with like a
to
big,
the other
and
extreme. Yeah,
yeah, and there's only about 10 large agencies that work with HIPAA in the United States. I mean, there's
mm,
lots of smaller ones, but it's pretty concentrated in a big 10.
mm,
And they're in every major market. But what happens is it's not a personalized experience. It's a menu of services, and, the account reps are always changing, so you can't build, a relationship with them. You can't really get what you want, because by the time you really get it explained, your account rep has changed because they got, promoted or whatever. And so then they start to get the doctor or, healthcare clinic, they start getting really frustrated. And that's kind of where we come. And this is where we can hit that sweet spot of, we can give them the safety and compliance, but we can also give them that personal touch. And I tell you, when you do that, you've got a client for life, because
yeah,
they've already experienced, oh, I know that I actually have to pay you,
mhm,
because I know what it looks like when I go cheap. I know that I'm not going to replace you with a big conglomerate, because we've already done that and that didn't work for us. And so if you give them really good personal attention, you can make, I mean, it's not uncommon to have retainers that are $80,000 a year or more to do marketing for small clinics, especially chains, because they
mhm,
have budgets. They just don't know where to put them. And you
right.
have to educate them.
That's fantastic. So with
Mhm.
this course then, how do we get access to it?
So it's pretty easy. You just go to medicalmarketingunlocked.com, and that will give you the information about that. We also have a kind of a freebie that we're giving away. So you kind of get a little bit more information, and it's the 5 most common types of breaches and how to prevent them. And
Mhm.
that is at medicalmarketingunlocked.com/Convesio.
Folks, you've heard it here first. Go and check that out because this really does sound like something that I know a lot of web designers personally who'd want to get behind this. I do know people who have been too nervous to approach medical companies because of things like compliance, data breaches, etc., and those big budgets. So be sure to check out. Links will be in the show notes below. April, thank you so much for your time as well as giving us that mission. I think that's my biggest takeaway from all of this. Yes, of course, protecting data, all of that is really, really important. But that mission part, I think, was the most
Right.
powerful, where people can get behind that and say, hey, I can make a change in this way. And the benefit will be extremely beneficial, of course, to the medical company. Like you said, they've tried both extremes and now they're going to be happy with you because you're offering that HIPAA compliance, but also then you're helping that company, you're pushing against, as it were, the bigger companies swallowing up. So actually, you're helping impact the US healthcare. And I know that sounds huge and lofty, but small actions really do make massive impact. So thank you so
It's
much
true.
for your time today. You are a legend.
Thank you so much for having me.
All righty. Take care, and hopefully, we'll see you real soon. Cheerio.
Bye.